Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is another Ask That. It is a beautiful sunny day, and today we are going to have an intense conversation with me, friend, mentor, advisor, just all around good human being, Sarah. Sarah, how the hell are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. I love that introduction. Thanks, Clark.
Well, for the people, before we start talking, give everybody just kind of a quick introduction as to who you are.
My name is Sara Gibbons. I'm the director of engineering for Quikly, which is a startup out of Detroit. So I'm Michigan based, born and raised. Been doing this for 20 years, which is hard to say because it makes me feel super old. But I
Yeah,
was told recently I gotta own it.
you and I are both in that double decades,
I know.
like
And my
with
daughter's in high school now, so there's just no avoiding the feeling old
yeah,
at
yeah.
all.
I'm not quite to the high school stage. I'm struggling with the preteen at the moment. Um,
Oh,
Soon next year
it'll you'll
we'll have teen.
yeah. You'll come out on the other side. It'll be good. You'll make
Oh,
it.
oh, whew, whew. So many things. So I'm going to start this backwards. For everybody who I'm going to give a little bit of background because I feel like this conversation actually is going to be a series of conversations that we'll have, probably pretty intense for folks that are listening. I want to set it up and start this backwards because I think it's important. So and for people listening, like Sarah didn't even know where this is going to come from. So this will be fun. So you and I have known each other for I don't know a number of years. I have
Yep.
asked for your help on a number of different I don't know efforts. Somebody's saying my audio is a little soft. Let's see if we can do a quick fix here. Preferences. This is live, so we just live it up.
It's just life.
Um, Totally agile. I want to make sure I come through in all of my glory, which when you stitch together a lot of cheap software, it's still cheap software. Input, snowball. No, that's as loud as it's going to get. Um, so, uh, so for a bit of context with folks, you and I have known each other for a long time. I've asked you for help and mentorship and just honest and raw feedback as to kind of everything that we've done at that conference and getting women involved and kids involved and you're not the only one. I've asked a number of ladies to kind of help me in that journey and Carrie is somebody. Carrie, my wife, is somebody who certainly is in this with me. We're all in. I mean,
hmm
and our kids too. And so, at the end of every one of these shows, I like to acknowledge a person. I'm actually going to start by acknowledging you and all of the help that you've given me, and not just me, but really in this industry of like trying to create a place of inclusion and getting women involved and having a safe place to go and the whole thing there, which is a difficult and hard conversation to have at times, which is why we're having it today. And so, thank you for that, and thank you for kind of all of the things that you've done for me because our mission is to just create this kick-ass community of folks, both kids, adults, where every day out of the year we can raise the tides that lifts all boats. And I would rather do that through example and behavior than just talking. And I think that, here we are 7 years later, and it's not something that really happens overnight. It's not something that you can just have a conversation and poof, it's good. It's a hard
Right.
thing. Um, and and unfortunately, this comes at a time where I've been involved in some incidences, not only at during the day job or the consulting job, but even little things not tech related, like on the soccer field with a coach who's yelling at a ref who happens to be a teenage
Mm,
girl who is in tears because a ref doesn't agree with said call. And you can take you could take there's not enough women in the workplace, but then we also don't have enough youth refs. We don't have enough men as teachers. Like we have like systemic problem. I don't want to say problems. I mean, they're realities.
Right.
And yet we're involved in these things in lots of different capacities. And so the conversation that I want to have is the conversation that we've had over the past few years, which is why I say that this is going to kind of go more than just today. I want us to talk about why these things are what they are and what's the kind of stuff that we can do to better oneself, or be more present in the moment to see it or stick up or whatever the things are, such that we can ask for people to behave or recognize behaviors that we can in fact change. Tall order, that's probably the most I've ever spoke on any one of these things. So, but I'm super excited to have this. It's been something that I've been waiting for, and thankfully the schedules have worked out well enough that here we are today. So I guess I'll start with the obvious. There aren't enough women in tech. There's not enough men teachers. There's not enough lady laborers. I don't know if that's the right thing that you would say. Right? If you're a lady in welding or plumbing, would that be a lady laborer? That sounds terrible. It sounds like ladies just are there to give labor. I don't really, they're called laborers, but that's such a double meaning. We had a storm. Total side tangent. I didn't really think the storm chaser thing was real. We had a really bad hailstorm come through, like softball side. I've never seen like
today.
Maybe 4 days ago.
Oh,
and so the hail that came from God was not like ball shaped. Like it looked like strange asteroids that destroyed like tons of houses. The amount of storm chasing that happens is staggering.
Really?
It's staggering. Like there have been trucks lined up and down the street of people going door to door, and the phone calls that ring. Like it's staggering. There's no better way to not get my business than to harass me.
Nope, nothing to see here. Move along.
Yeah,
right?
like no. I appreciate your effort, but no. So lady laborers, women in tech. We have issues. Like, is it? Well, I guess. Is it an issue? I mean, I know it's a reality. Like, we've ended up here. Was there something done in the beginning of time, I guess, that led us to a place to where we don't have enough women today? Like, was there something that happened that scared women off from being in tech? And you can look at, and I say that because you can look at some of the other fields and you can say, okay, well, I don't know. Obviously, there's a physical side to a man versus a woman, and whether a lady wants to be throwing around 2x4s or not, right? You could say, okay, well, there's a physical attribute to that, whether that's the right case or not. It's just, I mean, there is I don't want to pick up 2x4s and shingles.
Right.
Did we take a wrong turn when this started?
It's a good question. So, have you heard of the Women of the ENIAC?
I have not.
So I think it's a group of 6 women that were like the first computer programmers. They were calculating the trajectory of a missile, I think it was. And the guys all came in and they put together, they were like these big tubes. The guys assembled all the machines. And then these women were actually the programmers putting in the calculations to figure out the trajectory. So at that point, then the trajectory was correct. They'd go to celebrate, and all the men celebrated and left the women. They weren't invited because it was seen as like a data job, right? They weren't as well thought of. So
sure.
I always like that story because I think it's interesting. And the women, when you listen to their interviews, they don't think anything of it. They're like, well, that was just my job. And then I, went home. But so then from there, at that point,
dangerous precedents, right? I mean,
Right.
subconsciously or not, whatever, like dangerous precedent that got set at a time where that probably didn't just happen in tech.
Correct. Yep. Yep. So, um, and then I think like from that point, like decades pass and men start to feel like, hey, I don't just have to do hardware, right? I can do this programming. The software stuff was pretty cool too. And they felt, I got to get involved more. So then that started to push women out a little bit. But still, I think, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but women were still keeping involved in computer science. Men were above them. But then, I read this book called Unlocking the Clubhouse. It was really good. And they talk about,
I mean, you just know from the title where this
I
is
know.
going.
So,
Such garbage.
yeah, it starts off and it kind of tells like that story, and then it hits the 1980s. So the 1980s, like mid 1980s, there was just a complete drop off of women in computer science.
Hmm.
I think it went from like 30 some percent down to like in the teens that were studying it in college. And they talked about other things that were happening at the time, like personal computer, gaming systems. And when you look at the advertisement, that for that time was all geared towards boys.
Sure.
So here's an ad in a magazine with a boy playing on his, Atari
Yep.
or whatever
Yep.
it is. And then personal computers came out, again, advertised to boys. Boys showed more interest in them. Families had a tendency to put them in the boys' rooms. Well, then the boys would not let their sisters use it. Like, can't come in my room.
Well,
Or
yeah. I mean, boys are super selfish.
So the book talks about, which I think is an interesting theory, is that all at this point in time, it started to push girls out. So then as they grew up, they started to feel like that's a boy thing. That's not for me. I'm not welcome there. And
Mm-hmm.
they just go down different career paths.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I don't think since that point we've ever really recovered,
Yeah.
which that's from like mid 1980s, right? That's when all this programming starts.
Yeah.
And I think out of the gate, we were kind of like behind the ball there as far as like women, being represented.
Yeah. And so here's and I know that this conversation is going to bounce around, but I think everybody, if they just kind of bear with it or bear with at least me thinking out loud. So I think it's interesting you brought up kind of the boy versus girl. As somebody who has a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, I know you have a gaggle full of kids as well.
Yeah.
And so my son comes home. He's in 6th grade. So my son comes home the other day, and I don't know, the school threw out some stats, and it was girls of his age spend, I don't, I'm going to get the exact stat wrong, but I'll get the weights right. 75% of their time, or actually it was quite a bit higher, of their time in social media, which for me right now, not an age that even needs to happen.
I agree with you.
So 70, it was like 95% of their time in social media, whereas boys of the age, that same age, spend 95% of their time playing video games. And I think back to part of the reason that got me to where we are today with that conference was I had once heard a lady say, the best thing that you can do is create exposure for someone so that they can see it, because somebody won't necessarily associate with the fact that they can do a thing. Like if you've never seen a black president, then being a black president is never an option for you because it's just never happened. Whatever the other things are that are around that, you just don't necessarily associate with that. And so back to the programming piece, if there's not women who are in technology or seen as programmers, then one will never draw a subconscious conclusion that maybe they could in fact be a programmer as well. And so the best thing that we could do in any of our trades is just create exposure and tell the stories of everybody who's involved in that, such that somebody knows that they have a choice. And so you can fast forward to now and you think about Raspberry Pis and that conference and all of the efforts that are going on. And then it feels like today we have a much different set of problems that are worse. Like now we have exposure might not necessarily be the issue in tech, but we have other systemic problems.
Right. Yeah, it's very true. Like, I do a girls who code group, and we talk a lot about, as far as girls who code, right? You can't be what you can't see, right?
Yeah.
So I try and like get in front of that, speaking to exposure, right? I try to get out as much as possible because I feel, I never felt privileged in my career. I felt like it was a battle for me to get where I am. It was a difficult road. But now I feel 20 years in, I feel like I have a certain privilege that I have experience, I have network, I have a group of people that, know that, I know my stuff and I can work good. So I feel like I can get out there and talk to you about this, or, say, hey girls, I'm here, you can be me, and just give some exposure to that I don't think necessarily feel, or younger women in their career feel. I feel like it's just very delicate when they start off.
Okay.
So, um,
So what makes it delicate? Because this is the conversation. I mean, this brass tacks. Like, let's not bullshit
yeah,
around. Like, what is that makes it hard?
there's a lot of things, right? So, um, I've worked at a bunch of different places, different people, different atmospheres. Talked to a lot of women. There's certain things where you start off your career and you start off with a male coworker and they're advancing, or they're getting different projects. You're getting the same things, right? You start to feel a little bit different, and you don't feel like you can say anything because you're a junior dev, and there's things like that, all the way to, like I've been at places where they go to strip clubs. It's
Yep.
like, hey, after work, I'm the only woman, so they go. Well,
Yep.
then I'm excluded and I
Sure.
can't say anything because my boss went with them,
Sure.
So it's just like, you feel like if you're going to say something, then you're going to, lose your job.
Yep.
And if you're a junior dev and you don't have much experience, are you going to be able to find your next job? Is it going
Yep.
to be the pay you want, the work you want,
Yep.
the area you want, all of those things? So you just kind of have to just simmer in this feeling of like not feeling good, like, or, somebody, your boss or a coworker says something to you that makes you uncomfortable, or puts their hand on your shoulder. Maybe it could be innocent. They don't
Right.
mean
Right.
it, but it just makes you uncomfortable. It's
Yep.
that same situation where
Right.
you just don't feel like you can say anything.
Yeah.
So that's what
Yeah.
makes, I think, delicate. So you get over like a certain point and then you get like me and you're like, bring it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, um, I'm hyper sensitive to all of that. Obviously, I we run a number of companies. I've played leadership type roles in software development. We have the conference itself, and I think of the conference as our job is to kind of create and um, create moments and exhibit the correct behaviors, right? It's not necessarily about all of the education and all that, right? It's about exposure and moments. And if you're in a workplace, using your kind of loosely, like if you're in a workplace and it's okay that somebody talks in a derogatory fashion to somebody else, it sets that precedent that that's what others need to do to
Right.
then advance. And the for a lot, they'll feel like they don't fit in that place, whether that's a junior person, a lady, not a lady. Like there's a number of folks who will go, well, I just don't associate with that.
Right. And that's what I think women have a tendency not to say much or internalize it more, where, and I'm just making assumptions, right? Like
Yeah,
maybe
no,
a man, when stuff like that happens, they're like, man, those guys are, I don't want anything to do with them.
yep,
And it's always them. It's like, they're crazy. I don't like their behavior. I'm going to move on.
yeah,
Where a woman has probably more tendency to think that, is this, is this the industry? Is it a
yep,
reflection of me? Is it a reflection of my skills?
right. Did I somehow
Things
cause
like that.
this? I mean,
Right.
I agree, and I think it's important it's important that we have to recognize that we are physiologically different animals, right? We're not the same. We have different tendencies to do and react different. Women are certainly much more nurturing, thank God, than men. Otherwise, there would be nobody on this planet. And acknowledging that, right? Like the situations that occur, the responses are in fact different. My best mentors in things in my career have all been women. They've
That's great.
all been, and now product of the environment. They've also been very strong women who are confident in other things. Now, then you start to ask, well, was it the way they were brought up? Was it the environment they were around? Is it just because they've been in the industry for 20 years? And now they have thick skin and they didn't before. I can't really answer any of that other than I can say that their guidance has been drastically different than the guidance of men, both equally important, but drastically different. And I think it's taken me a long time to realize that the moment of being present in one situation and how one reacts to it has probably come more from my training as being a father than it necessarily has as being somebody in a workplace. Kids are super transparent with their actions and behaviors, right? And so you can see, if you're present enough, you can see those things. Like on the field, when that other coach was yelling last week, the player who scored on our team came off the field in tears because she felt like she caused the argument.
Sorry, I have an intruder. Okay, hold on 1 minute, okay? Go watch your movie. All right, sorry. He's asking for pretzels.
Yeah, as you should. It's lunchtime. What are you doing not feeding them?
I was like, here's the milk and like a huge bowl of goldfish.
Right.
I was like, watch your movie.
Yeah.
And they're gone.
It's kid crack.
I'll be there in 1 minute, okay? Go on. All right, sorry.
So this girl comes off the field and she's completely upset because she feels like because she scored and that other ref went off the handle at the ref, or that other coach went off the handle at the ref, that she caused this situation. So now you take it to a workplace where we're all a bunch of adults and some asshole is going off the rails, and now somebody else feels like they created an environment of which caused that, rather than that person's a lunatic or somebody else is fostering that behavior, and thus it's an issue. And so like these are the things that I get super concerned about, because that conference is a thing of scale, right? We have lots of people, thousands of people, and like there's no place for that. There's no place for it online. There's no place, like I don't want anybody associated with it if you're going to facilitate something like that.
Yeah, and that's I have mad respect for you for that, and I felt it since my first year at that conference, and feel it more and more every year, and that you're very aware of it. I mean, even in our conversations, and the fact that I think one of my first years there, you're like, you didn't have to, but you acknowledge the fact that there was like 40% women speaking.
Yeah,
and I was like, that's a stand-up move to just like call it out, and you're like, we're working on it, but you're like excited about where you were.
It's hard. It's what I feel like is the hardest. I can find young women, how old's your daughter? 13?
Yep.
12?
14.
It seems like there's an age of maybe like 9 to 16 where the young girls, young ladies, are 10 years more mature than the boys at that age. And getting them involved seems to be much easier than it is for me to get my son involved, who's 12.
Interesting.
But then add 20 years or 10 years, and getting women to be involved in that conference is drastically harder than it is, obviously, to get men involved. And I get that it's a journey. I think I know this year we had over 75 women submit to speak, and I never ever share those types of numbers. But I was flattered, like
That's
flattered.
great.
Our very first year, I was begging women to speak, and now we had 75. And so for us, we're not there until half of the people are women, and there are more people of color, and there are more people. There's
Right.
so many people around. Like the amount of diversity that comes. If it's all about the network, then your network is only as good as what you open it up to be. And if you're in your echo
Yeah.
chamber, then your echo chamber sucks. Like you're only ever going to hear what you hear. That's no good.
Right.
That doesn't solve the goal. And but it's hard. Like I think you told me years ago, things will change when people realize that there is a safe place and that they can get help and that it's not like other things.
Right.
And
Exactly.
I hold on to that every year. Granted, every year it gets harder and harder. Like I hold on to that. It's a reminder that you can't change culture overnight. Right?
True. Very true.
And so I think about the behaviors that we have in our industry, and I don't know how then do we change it really. So I'm so off topic
Right.
because this is about you.
No, this is great stuff. I love talking about this stuff. And it's interesting, like women talk, right? I might not have come to that conference cold because I don't know. I don't know what the
It's
atmosphere is like there.
it is
I
in the
wouldn't have
summer.
guessed.
It's in the summer.
Blindly. How about we'll go blindly?
Okay. You never know. We're all technical people.
True. But I think it was Corey Drew I talked to first, and she talked about that conference. And she was like, go, like gave it a thumbs up, which was my sign of that's a safe place.
Mm.
So then when I go out and I talk to people about that conference, that's their sign of like, okay, that's a safe place, to submit, or to go there, attend. So it's like you say, it's not going to happen overnight because I think if you talked about the girls being like teenagers and plus 20 years,
Yeah.
like 20 years from that point, like any women in like tech, been through like a bunch of shit,
Yeah.
right? We've seen some bad stuff go down generally. And we're going to be apprehensive about where we work, who we associate with, conferences we go to, where we submit to speak, all of those things. So it's not going to be, a mass submission to places we don't know because
Yeah.
we want to go someplace we're supported and feel comfortable. So I think that's why it takes time, right? It's just the word has to spread about it.
And so while that's very conference center focused, I have to imagine that the same is true for the workplace.
Very true. Yeah. I mean, I did a lot with Girl Develop It, right? So a lot of it is, we're training women in tech, and a lot of it is women new in their career or, maybe a little experienced. But the question we would always get was, where should I go work? Right? Like, which places are going to be welcoming to me? The same idea, right? We don't want to, even like younger women in their career, if they've had a rough go of it in school, or maybe they graduated only a couple in their class, they know enough that they want to be someplace where they can be supported and learn more and maybe have another woman around, right? So we get asked those questions a lot. And again, it's like that, what is that, like a whisper network kind of, right? Where it's just like these women talking to each other. And so, they're not going to go to a place where there's going to be, superheroes and beer kegs and, a liquor cabinet. And they're going to ask other women, what's it like there? Or they're going to go on an interview and they're going to look for things like that. And they're going to be like, I'm out.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, very much same as workplaces conference. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. At times I don't even want to say what those things are because I don't want to give some C-level like, oh, well, if I paint the walls this and I have some flowers in the corner, then I'll be more appealing to. Yeah, but that's happening in some damn boardroom. Like, oh, I would like to get more women in here, so let's paint the walls pink. And it's like, no, asshole, like that's not the way that this works. But
yeah,
so then So then how do you, I just, so then how does one make it better?
Oh, I think it's like there's lots of things, but I always say like my first recommendation for men is to be an ally. You know, I don't ask them to necessarily understand why I feel uncomfortable, but just trust
Why,
me and
why,
respect.
why?
Because like I think that gets into conversations of I'm trying to think of an example. Like, have you kept up with this whole craftsman job title lately? This whole conversation.
No.
Oh, that's series 2.
No, I try to do. I don't have enough time to read.
Um, but just as an example, right? Say, my job title is craftsman, and I say, like, you know, you're my boss. I'm like, you know, hey, Clark, I really am not comfortable with this job title. And you're like, why? Craftsman's like a cool thing. Why wouldn't you want to be a craftsman? I'm like, well, it's got man in it, and I'm a woman.
Oh,
I'd rather have a different title. So you might not, I mean,
right. There's the historical sense of the word kind of bleeding out or leaching out into today's society. And so while 150 years ago a craftsman meant, whatever, or what would be like the dudes like bending iron and throwing whatever, a
oh, yeah,
black
blacksmith?
blacksmith. Um, yeah, like so those things are like leaching up into today's world. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So, I have a conversation, you know, that kind of conversation sometimes I have with men, and they're like, okay, like you know, like you maybe like, I see it, it makes sense. I totally understand. Let's fix
yep,
that.
yep.
But more often than not, the reaction, you get is, I don't understand why you're offended by that. Like, why would that matter? Craftsman's a cool thing. Just, you know, like, who wouldn't want to be a craftsman? You make cool shit, right? But
It's
so,
like
and
using the
that's why I
word
say,
guys. Hey
yes,
guys, let's go
yes.
do that. Yeah,
Which I know I'm guilty of, and I'm trying hard to get
yeah,
over it. But
yeah. I mean, but I don't think if somebody, granted, I use it all the time. I became really, really. I got called out. Well, I didn't say I got called out. I got taught a long time ago, like when you use that word, this is what it could mean. And if somebody didn't take the time to explain it to me, I probably would have just never known. I never ever meant it as it was being perceived, but I never understood how it was being perceived. The place where it got super hard for me, or I became very enlightened at how much I had used it, was when I started, when I got licensed to be a coach and was coaching soccer. And now I had a group of kids, and then what is how then do you address that group of kids as a coach that's respectful? And I had a
right.
co-ed team, so I had girls and boys. How do you, how do you, like, how do you do that?
I use like guys it slips a lot for me.
Totally.
I mean,
Oh, but they use
it
it
work.
too. Like,
Yeah, they use it. Yeah. And, I work, my team is male and female, right? My girls who code club is boys and girls. So,
yeah,
when I can catch myself before it comes out, I always end up with, like you all or y'all, which I'm not Southern at all. And they always make fun of me, but I'm
right,
like, whatever, I'm trying.
right, right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but you want to set that example, right? And I think that's why we're having this conversation today, to bring this stuff out. And while subtle, when like I feel like I have a responsibility given the thousands of people who or tens of thousands of people that we influence on a yearly basis, like I feel like we have a responsibility to teach our kids or give them that exposure behavior to somebody who says this is they're doing the right things, or be open enough to say that this isn't the thing that should happen. Because
Right.
I'm not going to get it right. Like I'm not a fool to think that I'm perfect by any stretch. And
Yeah. But it's,
and sometimes I feel like there's like this sensitivity line where it's like we overreact, which then creates other issues. Rather than
Yeah.
creating teaching moments, we overreact and then punish. I don't know.
Right. But you're like open, you have an open attitude about it. Like, and you're
Yeah.
trying and you're aware of it with your soccer team or, in a work environment. That's what'll make a difference. Right. Like, because then if you see something happen, like, I'm in a meeting and I give an idea and no one listens to me. And then Bob gives that idea and they're like, Bob, that's the greatest idea ever. But I just said it. I mean, for like, that's why I think like being an ally, right? Like if someone's in a
Yeah.
meeting, like you're in that meeting, you're like, hey Bob, like that Sarah just said that, or
Right. Right.
or I say something and
Which takes a lot of internal not gratitude, but just gusto to make happen.
yeah, which I know, yeah, it's super, super difficult, but
Yeah.
it's, I feel like when I've seen that happen, whether it's, hey, I had that idea or I give an idea and then it starts to get bypassed, and you're like, hey, did you guys hear Sarah's idea? Because I think it's really good. We should talk about that.
Yeah.
Somehow give some credibility to me. It doesn't take much. And then all of a sudden, here I am, the one woman in the room. I've got a little credibility. I'm being listened to. It's a game changer a lot of times.
Yeah. One of the things that I've always, I don't want to call it a tenet, but I think that it's super important. The Friends episode, Friends, the TV show or the old
Oh
TV
yeah.
show,
It's
when
like popular again though. It's huge,
yeah,
isn't
I know, these kids, those guys.
Those guys.
No, one of the things that the Friends actors, I don't know what you would call the team of actors, um, that crew did, the crew being was it 5 or 6 of them that were on, did was compare their salaries and then went back to the production company or whatever the structure of the thing is, and said, no, we will all be paid equally or there will be no show. And
I forgot about that.
yeah, like that had a very profound impact on me, because it was so obvious, like that it was so disappointing that was a thing that needed to happen, but yet so obvious of a result that could be gained from it. And I've always been, since said time, which I don't know how old I was at the time of that happened. I guess I must have been in college. I've always been really, really transparent about things like salary with folks and bill rates and whatever, because that's only better for everybody. Like
Right.
there's nothing. I mean, the thing that I bring to the table is my experiences and willing to do whatever. That doesn't necessarily make me any more qualified than the person sitting next to me, regardless of race, gender, color, whatever. Like, whatever. I'm not trying to hide anything.
Yeah.
How do women? I feel like I'm pretty isolated in that thinking. Do women share that kind of stuff openly?
I don't think, I mean, someone you trust. I mean, I think because of what I've gotten involved with and the people I talk to, they'll come to me as how much should I ask for?
Yeah.
So I don't know if we talk about it amongst ourselves as much as I know I've been exposed to a lot of it, but I think that's more just the position I've been in and the organizations I've been involved with. But,
Should we?
I would love it, honestly. Like there's companies where all that's transparent, right? Like, I think Buffer is one of them. Buffer is like complete transparency of all their pay for all their people. They even have like a calculator, I think, when you apply. It's like, if you live in this area and you're at this level, this is
Yeah.
how much you're going to make. Like, well, that just takes, that's amazing because then I know that if I go there, I'm going to be paid fairly.
Yeah.
And I don't have to worry if the person sitting next to me is making more or less. It would be huge. I think it's a burden that women carry because we're notoriously like bad negotiators. We don't ask for enough money, things like that.
Yeah.
So we're always going to be underpaid.
Right.
Oh, this is getting into some deep stuff, Clark.
I know. Well, that's why I asked the question, because um, I, I'm very familiar with how the corporate environment works. I'm not afraid to ask for the things that I feel like I am worth. I also know the value that I bring. Um, and so
But see,
I,
that
I,
right there, right there.
I've always lived under, if you don't ask, you're never going to get, right? And if you don't ask
Right.
why, you'll never know why. And when I've mentored some folks in this way, like I've told some people, well, ask where you sat in the stack rank. Oh, well, they don't stack rank. Bullshit. They're a manager. They have to rank it. It's just human nature to rank people. Ask them where you sit. That's all.
Yeah.
What are they going to, if they say no, then you didn't know anyways, or they say yes and they tell you, and then your next question is, okay, great. What are the things that would have excelled me to whatever level 2 or 3, or where can I learn in that situation, and have them bring that back to you. But that's I'm an open book like that. I don't really care, but I'm
Yeah.
alone in that, or I'm weird.
No, I think like you said something about like you have confidence, right? Like confidence in your skill and
Yep.
your ability.
Yep.
So like for you going in there and being like, no, I need this much and this is what I bring, so take it or leave it, right? That's
Yeah.
something that puts you, I think, we were talking about diversity and gender, right? That's something that puts you like ahead of the game, probably of most women, because we're still feeling like I'm the odd man out, you know, and I don't know if I know as much as the next guy, when in reality they probably know twice as much,
Yep.
and
Yep.
so there's that lack of confidence doesn't help us at
Yep.
all.
Yeah.
I don't know the solution for that either, but
Well, I don't. I mean, I have. I mean, I have blonde hot wife. I have a daughter. I teach daughter all the time. Like, no, go do. Like, do not be
yeah,
afraid. Now, that's me kind of imparting how I feel she should be raised in this world of, like, I don't know, social goo and whatever that I would like to protect my little babies from. But knowing that it happens, right?
so do you
You know,
see the difference like in your co-ed soccer team? Do you see like thinking of confidence? Do you see a confidence difference in the girls versus the boys?
you have. I had to coach them much differently. Um, not. Um, I had to coach the boys in such a way that they would um, acknowledge their own presence, and who they are in a team. And I would have to coach the girls to be more confident, because the problem in youth, now we're talking about youth soccer to put context around
Right.
it. There's not enough girls in youth soccer, and so most of the time the girls start on a co-ed team. So there
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of coaching of the girls, not necessarily in skill, because a lot of the girls had either done tumbling or something to where their core was physically more advanced, than the boys were. So uh, they could kick the ball a little bit farther. And they didn't necessarily realize that. They could throw in better, but they didn't realize that. So a lot of it was coaching them to see what their strengths were in relation to the boys. Now, I'm a competitive person. So if I had coached a team that was well balanced and that the teammates had respected one another for their skills, then ultimately at the end of the day, we would win, and everybody would be able to share in the glory of that win, right? And if we lost, then everybody's going to share in the glory of the loss, but you will have worked 100% as a team, and
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't hang your heads down, right? And so I would work with the girls in that kind of confidence way, in being knowing that they could actually outsmart the boys. And I'd work with the boys kind of not necessarily in the opposite, but in that. And um, I know that the girls that have gone on, they're now a little older and they're on all girls teams. The dynamic is drastically different, right? They're more happy because they're playing with all girls, which I get.
Right.
I wish that there were more co-ed because I think that that creates this environment of equality that should happen in a sport where the equality can happen. Like it's not like football where you physiologically have an advantage because you just have more muscle mass.
Mm-hmm.
But in soccer, uh, you know, unless we're talking about pros, if we're talking about grade school and high school, the equality piece is certainly there. In fact, the girls are way tougher than the boys. Don't be fooled. Way tougher. They play a way harder, way more physical game. Um,
Now, do you see, I'm not trying to ask this question,
please
like for your
ask.
observation from your coaching experience and like how you said you coach the boys and the girls differently. Do you think that same kind of idea is like applicable to development teams? Whereas like a
Um,
manager, you're like mentoring them differently?
I
Or
think I would say as one gets older, you have to be more present. You have to be more present in the surroundings that you have, and so how you mentor somebody needs to be contextually aware. Like you can't, even in the coaching of the kids, like you can't just say, "Well, this is the only way I'm going to coach." I think you have to have. I tried to have some pillars that the team understood what we were going to do and what we stood for, and then tried to coach to those pillars. And if it was different for Elizabeth than it was for Daniel, that's fine. That was my job as a coach to get them closer to that pillar while being a
hmm
team. I see the same thing in with developing a software team. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and if you're not creating a high performing team, then you have to look at the context around the team.
sorry, pretzels
You
again.
need, I was gonna say, you need a bigger, the super big goldfish one,
Yeah.
the Costco double up.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm still
Do it.
listening,
No,
but
do it.
I've got candy in here. Here, look at. You want that?
This is called real life work at home stuff.
I've got a bag of like extra candy from treats and stuff at schools.
Yep,
You know, that I happen to have a Valentine's Day bag with a thing of goldfish and like a couple chocolates in it.
there it
So
is. There, back to the goldfish.
look at that. Do you have more?
Yeah.
Okay, eat that and I'll give you more. All right. I'm good.
Yeah, I
Not
mean,
pretzels, but hopefully I'm good.
I think you do. I think you have to
Yeah,
be
look at
conscious and present of what your team is in their surroundings. Like, I'm not a person that you can think will sit in a chair 8 hours out of the day and do my best work. Nor should
Right.
you, if I know that, like, you shouldn't try to dictate that on me either. I know that breaks the kind of societal change of come into work and punch in and punch out, but like we're in a creative field, and so
Yeah,
that that
exactly. Yeah.
that doesn't work. Like, I mean, I sometimes the best things come when they're in the shower. Like you go, oh, yeah, that's what I need to do.
So true.
Right. Um, so I think the leaders in said companies, big, not just companies. I mean, efforts. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a
Yeah.
paid for thing, a volunteer thing. You have to acknowledge your environment, right? Your family, your kids, your experience. You have to be willing and vulnerable enough to ask, like, what do you have going on, and actually give a shit. And
hmm
I don't know. That's a lady, a man. I think that's just human. Like, be a good
Right.
person, and you'll get good stuff in return.
That's a good point too, though. I mean, like a lot of, places that maybe don't have high number of females in their tech department, right? They probably maybe aren't as flexible on their schedule,
Yeah,
or, I mean, that's a game changer for a working mom. Like for me to be able to work from home or to say, you know what, my kid's sick, I've got to work at night. That's huge. I
Yeah.
mean,
I
it's not
don't,
at a lot of places.
which blows my mind. I often, so, I mean, she's not there at the moment, but my wife's desk is right there. And, um, I don't know, say, I call them starving entrepreneurs. Like, we're working at it. I don't. I have been fortunate enough in my career to where I've been able to work at home. There's been times where I've traveled a lot. I've made good money. I've made bad money. I don't know how the hell anybody can do this. And if you have kids, I can remember being super young in my day and thinking, "Oh man, Jim's falling asleep at the desk again." Right? Like, how can this dude be doing this? Like, just whatever. No, then fast forward and you have a couple kids and they're walking diseases, right? They catch them every
Yeah.
day in school. They're always sick. The person who has the best damn schedule is the doctor, which isn't your schedule, right? I've got to go in at
Right.
2, or my kid needs this, or you need this referral to go to this person. Like, it's never ending. And then they get older and it gets worse. They're in sports, and the sports um, is, oh well, they got to be at practice at 4:30. Okay,
Right.
well
I know.
they got off the bus at 3. Like, what when when is this supposed to happen? Oh, and of course it's in a club that's, it's in a place that's 30 minutes away, so you've got to leave at 4, and you're like, oh my lord.
You got to
So
try and squeeze some work in. And like,
right. And like, I like working, so I'm typically like in the truck at the soccer practice, banging away on something. But I'm a father first, right? I'm a husband
right.
first. I am not. I am an employee fourth. Um,
Hmm.
and it's I the companies who have figured it out, I praise them, because we are not in the 50s anymore. Like, it's
Yeah.
just not. It just doesn't work. Schools are
Yeah.
different. You have to be made available. It's just different.
Yeah. There's another book I read called The Second Shift. It's not tech focused, but it's basically women, couples dealing with, rigid work schedules
Yeah.
and just life. And, it makes me think a lot about okay, hold on. It's another one.
Life. Yeah, life.
But, the whole point is that it's, if, my husband has a job with rigid hours, right? And that's not wavering. I still have to get to the doctor's appointment,
Right.
and I've got to get them to the soccer practice, and I've got the ballet lesson,
Yep.
right? Somebody's got to be here to do that. So,
Yep.
I mean, there's a drop off of women in tech about mid-career. And I think that's for a lot of reasons, but one of them is
Is
probably life,
Yeah, I
right?
was gonna say, is that just tech though, or is that can we is that across the board?
I'm not sure across the board. That's a good question. I know, he's constructing a stool behind me to get
There
the
you go.
rest of it.
Love it. He'll be an
You
engineer.
can, yeah. But I'm not sure across like women as a whole, but I know there's like a 50% drop off for women in tech. Some of them is for family, and some of them is they just like have
Yeah.
had
Yep.
enough of,
The
not
BS.
feeling comfortable. Yeah, the
Yep.
BS, there's like a constant fight to like prove yourself.
Yep.
But I feel like a lot of it is just life goes on, and, a lot of times I think we saw that in society where the man's career is probably feels more important, right, than the woman's.
So it's interesting you say that. I mean, if you kind of go take our whole conversation together, if the man is getting paid more, then the family unit says, I mean, this is certainly the way when Carrie and I first had our kids. As she was in corporate America. She made great money. I happened to make slightly more.
Hmm.
I had a bigger opportunity that would make more money. It's super expensive to work. I think it's more expensive to work if you're a lady than a man, right? You're just the wardrobe is drastically more expensive,
Yeah.
but I don't think we acknowledge that, right? So we were both driving an hour to work. you have gas on 2 cars, you have lunch on 2 cars, you have wardrobes, you have all this other stuff
Yep.
that goes with it. And before you know it, you're spending $40,000 and you have not gained anything. I mean, by the time we had added up gas, taxes, daycare, this and that, it was like, is the remaining 20,000 out of the, what is like,
Yeah.
is it really even worth that? Oh, sure shit, it's not. Like
Right.
we've been pretty grounded in trying to make sure that the family's first, like have a family dinner every night and do these things because that's important. And
Yeah, it's good. Didn't you blog on that? Like be present or something? I forget the title of it. Be present, not.
no, I haven't.
Oh, well, you
No,
should.
no,
Maybe we
no, I
talked
haven't.
about it.
No, the blog, that one blog post I put out was one time, and one time only. One
Oh,
time,
that was
anytime,
it.
and one time,
That was it.
anytime, and one time only.
That was it.
Um, but yeah, like to your, it makes this weird cycle because you don't have to work. I mean, you have to make income, but income can
Right.
be made lots of different ways, especially today. And so if it's if the tech thing's not working, there's 1,000 other opportunities. Like there is
Right.
nothing glorious about this. And so, I mean, you can make it glorious if you align it to your passion, but it's not necessarily anything fancy. Like, I don't know. Maybe I
Yeah.
glorified it more when I was younger, but the reality is you can take those skills and use them for other good, and you could do it at home, and you can make equally as much money if you have found your kind of true calling. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I love hearing all the mom startup stories of the thing that they wanted to fix and they fixed it and they just rolled in bank because it was like, yeah, obvious.
Yeah, yeah. And there's another book I'm reading called The Disruptors,
Okay.
and it talks about the lack of like VC funding going to women and the women like on boards and CEOs. And one of the points they make in there is that women's health in particular, that's just one thing they called out was it's so lacking in new ideas and technology because
Mm.
there's no women leading this charge, right?
Oh,
But
totally.
it's just about, it was just an example they gave about if you can get women involved in their different ideas, like you're saying about a mom that sees a need and she fills it and creates a company. It's
Yeah.
like there's so much of that out there that just needs to be done.
Yeah.
Uh, and I
I,
think tech is like a really good vessel for like women to do a lot of these things,
yeah.
like we can work from, I mean, I could take my MacBook and I could go anywhere and I could still be working. I could be
Yeah.
on the other side of the world and still do my job.
Yeah.
There's not many jobs you can have like that. So there's no
Yeah.
reason for us not to be flexible and allow all these different schedules and different people to come join the party, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So to that end, because we're coming up on an hour and you're running out of goldfish. We're certainly
you got an
going.
impressive setup over here, by the
Yeah,
way.
I bet. When it's goldfish, boy, let me tell you something
There's
about
like a little crunch bar in there too,
yeah,
I think.
something about young men and fruit snacks and goldfish. Like they are the ultimate like
Yeah.
kids crack. Certainly, we're going to continue this conversation again. I guess if there's a takeaway for anybody today, I would say I think that this is a great time to be a lady in this industry. I think you have a unique advantage at the moment that if you don't seize it, we're not going to see real change. And what I mean by that is if mentored or if one needs to be mentored or if confidence is grown, like go get involved, like go ask, like the voice, I feel like the voice is now heard more now at now being like present time kind of moving forward than it has been in my last 20 years of the career. And so I guess seek the mentorship or advice or the others and like go get it because like it's there. it's there and but you got to do it. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
the hard piece of it, I guess.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that being a woman in tech is sometimes you feel very like isolated.
Yeah.
And then I think that's how women end up leaving as well.
Yeah.
But you just have to have support. You
Yeah.
gotta, so call out to all the women out there in tech, make sure you network and get some people behind you. Find some women, get a mentor. I've had an amazing mentor, not a woman, in my life. And I'm grateful for that, for sure. But, I feel like I wish I would have had, a woman mentor as I was coming up in my career
Yeah.
that I could lean on as well. So, if you can have one, like find those women out and like grab a hold of them, talk to them, get coffee with them, know that, you're not alone, right?
Yeah.
It's also sometimes you just need as a woman, you need like
Somebody to
someone to
talk to.
ask.
Yep.
Yeah, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
hey, this happened at work and I don't know if that's right or not.
Yeah.
You just don't know. So it's just,
Yes.
you need a sounding board a little bit. So
Yes.
having that makes the isolation less and gives you, like, you're not crazy, right? You just can like
Right.
vent everything and
Right.
it's definitely needed.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I think that goes back to that sharing comment. Like, no. We need to share. We need to talk about it. You need to go ask somebody, man, woman, regardless. Like, this happened. Yeah, no, that's not right. Like, we're not.
yeah,
That's not behavior we should have in the workplace. Like, please do something about that.
right. I kind
And
of think about like, with my kids too, like, something happens to
yes,
them and they're
yes.
like, I don't want to go to school. Well, why don't you want to go to school? Like
Mm-hmm.
they can't understand why.
Yep.
They just know they don't want to, right? I feel like it's looking back at my younger self, I can see that there were times where it was like I wasn't happy or didn't feel in the career where I was working. But now I know why. I can kind of dissect what was happening and figure it out. But my younger self was like, I just feel uncomfortable and
Right.
I just have to go. I don't know why.
Yeah. 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 That's a good one with the kids. Their frame of reference isn't um, educated, if you will, right? They don't have a bank of experiences to say that this is wrong or not wrong. And so I
Right.
think we have an obligation as parents to be open and listen, to our kids to understand. I'm like, I don't like being a parent in this world because I don't understand it. Like I'm very unconfident about being a parent because I
Yeah.
cannot relate to my daughter who has to grow up in a world where social media is what it is. Now, I'm not bagging on social media, but the pressures that will come to a young girl are not ones that I want my daughter to have to deal with. And so I think having these conversations and listening, being present with that such that they know to share these things like, oh, well, this happened at school. Like, oh, well, Jimmy, that's not appropriate. Like, that's even though the school, like, whatever, like, hell no, that doesn't work.
Oh, I think I'm
Out of the
out.
fish. Out of the fish. All right.
Oh, I am totally out. I'll get you more in a minute, okay? Just hold on. He's actually watching Boss Baby too, by the way, which speaks volumes about my life.
Right. And here's an iPad kid. All right. Last question. We'll reconvene this conversation another day. But last question for you. One that I've asked everybody. How would you define community and what does it mean to you?
Oh, I probably define community as probably support. I think it's just support, and it's having um being that support and like having it, being able to like go find it. Oh, this is a good question. I haven't thought about it. I was all like,
I know.
I don't know, it's super important to me because, like I mentioned, I feel grateful for where I'm at in my career. So my problem now is I can't say no problem because I want to be everywhere and do everything because I want to go to this meetup group over here and speak at that because it's only been men speaking there to show them that, I'm a woman and I can do this too. Or if there's women that go there to be like, you have support, right? I'm here. You can, we're all here together, just to be an example, someone to reach out to, give me my email. I think it all boils down to me is just support.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
With that being said, because there are no goldfish, so we're expediting this. Sara, where can people find you?
You can find, I think I'm on that Slack as Sara. Yeah. Imagine that, Sara. I claimed it early on. I think as soon as I opened Slack, I was like, I'm getting it.
I never really thought about the claiming one said short name on Slack channels.
Well, everywhere else I'm Sara Gibby. It's Saragibby. Okay. And so every time like a new thing comes out, I'm claiming it like wherever I can. Yeah. I could not get it on Spotify though, and it still gets me. Like I'm like give that some numbers. I'm like,
damn that.
How did I let that happen?
Damn, yes, Spotify, you and your subscriptions. Okay. With that being said, Sara, thank you for the conversation today. Again, one we're going to continue to have. I feel like we're just kind of scratched the surface of like we haven't even got into like what are the things that we can really do and some situational stuff that just kind of highlight like. Oh yeah. Yeah, I think all right. We touched on it a little bit, right? We've set up this whole conversation. Guys isn't a good thing, or when somebody's passed over and talking, like we're going to take that to another level. But thank you for your time today. I know you got a sick one. You've no goldfish. Thank you for everybody who's listening. Drop a comment below, a thumbs up. Reach out to Sara and I. Let's continue this conversation. And until next time, Sara.
Yeah, this was great. Fun. Thanks so much. Yeah, there's so much more to talk about. Even like kids stuff too. I mean, it's all very interesting to me. So.
Yep.
Yeah, this was great. I'm glad you're doing this. It's good stuff.
I appreciate it. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you next time.